Just over 35 years ago, the unthinkable happened, and what followed can only be described as a miracle. It was April 28, 1988, and a routine service for Aloha Airlines Flight 243 on a Boeing 737 from Hilo, Big Island, Hawaii. There were 89 passengers, 2 flight crew, and 3 flight attendants on board. A passenger reportedly thought that they saw a crack in the fuselage near the aircraft door while boarding but did not mention this to the crew. The captain of the flight was 44-year-old Robert Schornsteimer, an experienced pilot. The first officer was 36-year-old Madeline Tompkins. Flight 243 departed from Hilo International Airport at 13:25 on April 28, 1988, with 6 crew members and 89 passengers on board, bound for Honolulu. Nothing unusual was noted during the pre-departure inspection of the aircraft. Meteorological conditions were checked. After a routine takeoff and ascent, the aircraft had reached its normal flight altitude of 24,000 feet. At 24,000 feet, the passengers remained in their seats with seatbelts on for such a short flight, and the flight attendants started their service. The lead flight attendant, Clarabelle Lansing, was at row 5 of the aircraft serving drinks, Jane Sato Tomita at row 2, and Michelle Honda was working at row 15. When at around 13:48, south-southeast of Kahului on the island of Maui, a small section on the left side of the roof ruptured with a whooshing sound. The first officer noticed pieces of gray insulation floating above the cabin. The cockpit door had broken away and the captain could see blue sky where the first-class ceiling had been. The captain felt the aircraft roll to the left and right, and the controls went loose. The force of the decompression continued to peel back the aircraft fuselage, leaving the top half front of the aircraft exposed to the elements. Clarabelle was sucked out of the aircraft, and despite a search, her body was never found. Jane was thrown into the economy cabin covered in debris and legs trapped by wires. She suffered lacerations on her head, and was bleeding and unconscious. Michelle felt pressure on her left shoulder and was thrown shoeless to the floor. The aircraft was filled with swirling debris, the floor at the front had buckled, and the forces of the air pressure were incomprehensible. Michelle crawled down the aisle, holding onto the base of the seats. She understood from her training that this was a decompression from the noise, smoke and flying debris. Michelle tried to contact the flight crew but to no avail as the interphone system was destroyed. She shouted to the passengers to put on their life jackets but was struggling with the noise. The oxygen mask system was destroyed, and the flight crew had started an emergency descent. Michelle tried to calm the passengers and sometimes found herself faced upwards on her back in the cabin, holding on for dear life. She managed to reach Jane but could not free her from the wreckage. The passengers were injured by debris and covered in blood, and Michelle continued to work her way through the aircraft, trying to console them. She saw a passenger with a piece of debris embedded in his face but knew from her first aid training that this was to be left alone, and she could not help but only console. As the aircraft was coming down to land, she tried to shout her commands, heads down, but no voice was coming out. She held on to whatever she could, and to Jane with the passengers' help. The aircraft landed safely at the airport in Maui. Michelle started the evacuation with the help of an off-duty flight attendant, Amy Jones Brown, who was traveling as a passenger. All passengers survived, although some were severely injured. Jane suffered a concussion and major cuts to her head and was taken to hospital. It was only then that Michelle realized that Clarabelle was missing. There is no doubt that she did everything she could in the circumstances to do her duty and try and look after the passengers. Even afterward, Michelle visited the hospital to see the passengers she'd gone through this disaster with. Definitely, here was a committed flight attendant who went beyond the call of duty. Investigation by the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, concluded that the accident was caused by metal fatigue exacerbated by crevice corrosion. The aircraft was 19 years old and operated in a coastal environment, with exposure to salt and humidity. During an interview, Passenger Gail Yamamoto told investigators that she had noticed a crack in the fuselage upon boarding, but did not notify anyone. So, hope you guys notify staff about such damage while traveling. Click on right to watch such mysterious videos and subscribe to become member of our channel.